Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. As we go into the summer break, multiple teams are trying to figure out a way to upgrade their engineering department going into the upcoming seasons. Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull are all involved in this one, but Mercedes have hired a top aero guy from Red Bull as they try and bolster their department and bid an actual challenge to the RB20 that's going to be made for next season. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. A couple of driver updates for you guys as well today. Firstly on Zhou Guanyu of Alfa Romeo. Rumour has it they're going to extend his contract. This is really good news. I think Zhou has done an admirable job in the Alfa, both of the last couple of seasons. This year especially so far, the car hasn't been particularly good, but he's had some good results. And yes, on average, Bottas has probably got the better of him, but you'd expect that. And Zhou, I think, is only getting better. I do worry for Zhou's seat in Formula 1 come a couple of years' time when Alfa Romeo become Audi Sauber, which it seems they're going to very shortly indeed. They're probably going to want to have at least German drivers from 2026. We've talked about Mick Schumacher. We've talked about them trying to get Sebastian Vettel in the car. So I think Zhou might have another season and that might be it for him. But I'm happy that he's getting another one because I think he's done a good job in the Sauber car, technically Alfa Romeo branded. And also on Yuki Tsunoda. Very interesting what happens, I would say, with AlphaTauri from now to the end of the year, because Daniel Ricciardo came in, did a great job in his first race in Hungary, but in Spa had a bit of a difficult weekend, and Tsunoda had a really good performance. And I think Yuki binned it in the wall, didn't he, in Hungary, and he even talked about it, Yuki, and he said, look, Ricciardo coming in put more pressure on me, and it caused me to make some mistakes, but he put together a great weekend to get 1 point on the board in Spa. Daniel Ricciardo didn't get any points on the board, despite being close-ish to getting one in the sprint race, but it seems they're going to keep him around, which is pretty interesting just because I think that they will, depending on what happens between Ricciardo and Tsunoda, one of those two drivers will kind of be considered to be like out of the Red Bull racing race for the starting seat. But so yeah, keeping Tsunoda around again, if Ricciardo was to get the better of him, is a pretty, Yuki's a good driver, maybe they'll keep him around, but I think they will have to make a call as to who is potentially Red Bull Max Verstappen teammate caliber based on the way this rest of the season goes. And there was the rumour yesterday that I'm pretty damn certain cannot happen, but there have been some rumours that maybe AlphaTauri can somehow use the RB19 next year, in which case Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo will probably be having a rather good time. People have been joking about the Red Bull 1, 2, 3, 4 next year between the RB20 and the RB19, but I highly doubt that's actually going to be possible. Let's talk about Ferrari then and what's going on with some of these teams. Bit of drama as well, it's got to be said. We heard a while ago now from Otmar, who's now been fired by Alpine, but a lot of discussions around the engine power. Renault say that their engine is 30 horsepower down on the rest of the competition. The rumour is that it's basically Red Bull has the best engine, then Ferrari slightly behind, then Mercedes, and then Alpine quite a way behind with their power units. Vasseur, though, he doesn't believe Alpine, because Alpine is saying, well, we're outside of the 1% threshold or whatever, so by the rules that are coming in for 2026, we should be allowed extra development time to catch up, and the engines are meant to be similar enough. That's been the plan for the last couple of years, but as it turns out, they're saying that to try and get more development time to catch up their engine. Vasseur says he's not convinced. He doesn't think their engine is actually that far behind on performance, and it's quite an interesting debate to be had there because they can say we're 30 HP down. Are they really? Do they actually? Should they be given extra testing time and development time on their engines over and above what they've already had? Vasseur and Ferrari say no, which is pretty spicy, it's got to be said. Now, speaking of Ferrari, Loic Serra, who's been Mercedes performance director for some time, he is this man on the, just next to Bottas, between Bottas and Hamilton from, clearly the Montreal Grand Prix from a few years ago at this point. He is moving on from Mercedes to go and join Ferrari, and this apparently is the intention of Vasseur to try and find a way to build a bit of a dream team like Ferrari used to have when they had Schumacher and John Todt and Ross Brawn, of course, and the team over there that they built at the time. Vasseur is apparently trying to do something similar. He's bringing in Loic Serra in 2025, and Serra is very close friends with Pierre Vacher, who's Red Bull's technical director, and a man that Ferrari have tried to target a couple of times over the last couple of months. And I imagine they keep going back to him with more and more money to try and get him to leave. Now, Red Bull believes that Vache is going to stay, and he probably will, but Michael Schmidt from AMUS says that Vasseur is trying to do what Jean Todt did and build, a bit of a dream team, try and get allies in from the outside, and it's very interesting what Ferrari are trying to do as a result of this. Whether it works for them, I don't know, but I think Vasseur is probably the man to try and take them in the right direction, but it's not like Ferrari still don't have a whole host of issues to resolve. So that's the current rumour. Red Bull believes this is Vache here on the right-hand side is going to stay at Red Bull, and is given a lot of credit for what he's done. People say, oh, Adrian Newey's the mastermind, which, he is. He's the CTO. He makes, I suppose, the majority of the decisions on the direction of the car, but it's not just a one-man show over there at Red Bull, right? And they've got many aerodynamicists and technical directors who make big decisions, and also even further down than Newey and Vache, you've got other guys that also are very much involved. And that's where the discussion revolves to Mercedes. Over the last several years, during the Mercedes period of dominance, they lost a lot of talent. A lot of their guys got poached away, especially pre-cost cap. Red Bull came in and said, I think Red Bull hired like 40, 50 engineers from Mercedes over a few year periods. A lot of it was on engine, some of it was on aero, and that's just tend to be how things go. When you dominate the sport, 8 Constructors' Championships in a row for Mercedes, you're going to lose a lot of talent. Some of your top guys are going to get poached away. It's how it works. Now we're starting to see that occur the other way around, when everybody right now wants Red Bull people. It's happened with Aston Martin, right? They got Dan Fallows, they brought in a few Red Bull people to their team over the last season or so, and Mercedes are now trying to do the same thing. This fella here, Adil El Ouazizi, who is, he's not exactly a household name in the world of aerodynamics, but he does have quite an impressive tenure here in Formula 1, has been hired away from Red Bull. So he's a principal aerodynamicist now at Mercedes, and was previously an aero development team leader at Red Bull, leaving them just a couple of weeks ago, it seems, and has, interestingly enough, started work at Mercedes immediately, which is a little bit surprising. You would think, right, that there'd be some sort of gardening leave periods here where people that leave a team, having worked on the daily with all of the aero components of the RB19 and potentially development of the RB20, to leave with no issues with a gardening leave, or you've got to take some time off and go and join Mercedes pretty much a week or so later, is potentially quite a big win for Mercedes. Now, all the teams have tried to do this, but it is at least one indication that Mercedes are trying to make a go of things to actually bolster their aerodynamic department here, because definitely their understanding of this aero set of regulations has not been anywhere near as strong as it was prior. Toto Wolff has said a couple of times that he doesn't really like these ground effect cars. He thinks they're problematic, and look, Red Bull have proven that it can be done if you know what you're doing. Newey definitely knows what he's doing, but it's not just Newey that designs these cars. So Adil's heritage in Formula 1 goes back all the way to McLaren 2006 to 2009. CFD aerodynamicist at the time at McLaren Racing. They built some decent cars in that time, right? 2008 and 2007, especially 2009. Less talked about that, the better from that perspective. And then went to join Ferrari for 6 years. Was like CFD aero guy, senior concept aero. Then joined Red Bull in 2018 until 2023, and has now gone to join Mercedes. So it's only one hire, and it's not like they've got Adrian Newey Mercedes. It's not like they've managed to poach Newey and go and join their team. But nonetheless, this is some indication of intent by other teams, Ferrari and Mercedes, to try and improve their aero understanding of these cars. Because right now, like, Red Bull are so far ahead in performance, and it seems in understanding as well, that it's going to be very difficult to believe that any team is going to catch them until 2026, when the regulations change entirely. Even Toto Wolff said the upgrade that Red Bull brought in Hungary has allowed them to exploit something even further. As he says, it is what it is. I often say it's a meritocracy. It's on us to fight back, and fighting back in part, they've got the drivers, they've got Toto Wolff's there, they've got other elements of the team, but clearly their engineering department isn't as strong now as it was a few years ago, and especially isn't as strong in this set of regulations. So that's a lot of what the fighting back is. Did we expect the gap to Red Bull? Certainly not. And they've got even faster, and even Max Verstappen admitted that he slowed down quite a lot during the Belgian Grand Prix. The track working super hard on the tyres. That's why he was lifting through Eau Rouge and Raidillon just to protect the tyres a little bit more, and that costs you time all the way down the straight, of course. So he was losing a good half a second a lap just on his own admission. And, well, it's pretty scary, right? Now, the Red Bull is good there, but it is pretty scary. And I also wanted to mention this for you guys as well. So this, courtesy of Autosport, is the standings this time this season compared to this time last season on the constructors side. 22 versus 23. And this is what we find. So Red Bull were first last year, they're first this year, and first by an absolute mile. Now, last year there were only really 3 teams in the mix of the top, whereas this year there's 4. So Mercedes have slightly less points, as do Ferrari quite significantly, but Aston have jumped up, and Aston have pretty much 10x to their points from this season to last season. So McLaren have technically stayed where they are, but they've obviously got pretty much all of those points in just the last few races. Alpine have fallen off, and then you get to the bottom 4, and this is where things are quite interesting as far as I'm concerned, is that last season, okay, Williams only had 3 points, but Alfa, Haas, AlphaTauri and Aston Martin all had 50, 20 points, something respectable. This year, Haas, Williams, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri have barely any points even combined. I mean, if you combine these up, what's this? 22, 31, 34, that's the same as Haas had last year of the bottom 4 teams. Despite the fact that this year, the cars are closer in performance, certainly in qualifying pace. This is probably the closest grid that feasibly we've ever had in Formula 1. We've had some incredibly tight qualifying sessions, but in the race, nobody can seem to really get any points outside of a miracle drive from Albon, or just so happens, AlphaTauri, Yuki Tsunoda picks up a P10 again, and a P10 is an incredible drive that he has to get to pick up 1 measly point. And I think the reason why, it's partly reliability nowadays. The top teams barely ever collapse, really. Happened a few times in the early races of last season with Ferrari and with Red Bull for sure, but nowadays that doesn't happen. And if you're a Yuki Tsunoda, or if you're a Bottas, or any of the drivers in these cars, you have to rely on, you've got the 2 Red Bulls, the 2 Mercedes, the 2 Astons, and Stroll is sometimes out of the top 10. The 2 Ferraris and now the 2 McLarens with another great driver pairing. There just aren't many points up for grabs. And maybe some would say that's absolutely fine, but I think there is an argument that we might need to consider opening points up to the top 12 rather than the top 10. I think for now with 10 teams, I don't mind it as it is. I think it's okay. But if we were to add another team, if we were going to go to 11 teams on the grid, I think for sure we'd have to give points to the top 12 rather than the top 10. Just because with reliability, as I say, and with all these cars being pretty clear in terms of race pace compared to the bottom, there just aren't many points being scored, despite the fact that the grid is theoretically closer than it was before. Maybe that's not a problem, and potentially the best team down here will still win, but it doesn't feel like it's the best way that it could possibly happen at the moment. But very much enjoyed to your perspective in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.